Hello, and welcome to Getting Started with ReflectInsight Router Service. My name is Callan Campbell, and today I'll be talking about ReflectInsight Router Service. So let's get started. What is ReflectInsight Router Service? The ReflectInsight Router Service is a Windows service that receives log messages from remote ReflectInsight client applications anywhere on your network. When log messages have been received, the ReflectInsight Router Service will delegate them to configured destinations. You can think of the ReflectInsight Router Service as Router Service is live logging for remote computers. To download ReflectInsight Router Service, go to www.reflectsoftware.com. ReflectInsight Router Service can be installed in any location, and the service, when installed, will automatically be installed and started automatically. ReflectInsight Router is free to use, no license required. So let's go ahead now and install it. So as I said before, go to reflectsoftware.com, click on the Try tab, and you want to download ReflectInsight Router Service Setup x64. If you have a 32-bit operating system, then you want to download the x86. At this time, if you haven't already done so, please download ReflectInsight x64 or again x86 if you have a 32-bit operating system. Now I've already gone ahead and downloaded these So let's run setup. Agree. I'm going to change the location. By default it goes to program files. So I'm going to go to the C drive, the root, install the ReflectInsight Router Service. We can verify that the router service has been installed by using PowerShell. I'm going to go here, I'm going to type in get service reflect for shorthand star. You can see there the ReflectInsight Router Service is running. If you want to stop it, you can say stop service. Service has been stopped. If I want to start it again, start service. You can see that it's again running. Now that we have the ReflectInsight Router Service installed, let's look at its configuration. By default, the log files are saved to the following folder: C program title, Flex Software / ReflectInsight Router Service, and logs. You can see that in the entry here under number 1. This can be changed. The other configuration is the router port, which is 10.881. This again can be changed to any port you wish. And that third configuration that you need to know about is the remote worker TCP. Again, this here is on port 10.882. This port is what the ReflectInsight Live Viewer's remote connection will connect to. Let's take a little in further detail at the ReflectInsight Router Service configuration. So if you go to where I installed it, you can see here, this is the configuration file. Just open it. So here's where I'm storing my log files. I can change that to anything I want. I'm going to leave it the default. Recycle is for 7 days, which means it will keep about 7 days of log files, and then it will just keep recycling and keeping 7 days. If you want more than 7 days, change that. If you want to keep all log files, then just change it to 0. We have the port number. And then we have the other port number. That's it for configuration. Most of the stuff really doesn't need to change, but if you do need to change it, this is what you would change. Now if you want to look at the log files where they're stored, .nc program data, reflect software / ReflectInsight / logs. So here's our router service log file. So in here you can see the router service is started, stopped, started, that kind of stuff. So it's very helpful for debugging. If your router service won't start up, you'd want to look at this log file. Okay, now up to now we looked at the router service configuration. Now let's discuss about your application configuration for sending to the router service. So in there, now we'll get into more details about how to do this, but there are a few things to keep in mind. So one is add a router definition of where you'll be logging to. Two important things are the host name and the port. Now keep this in mind where you install the router service. If it's on it's on server A, and you defined on that server to use 10.8.8.1, then leave the defaults. But if you decide to use a different port over the network, then you would want to put that port number in here. The second configuration is in the listener groups. You want to add a router for the TCP destination. Make sure it has the same name as above. So where you see number 1 here, I called it my router TCP. You want again here use the same name. Okay, the next piece for configuration, this is really from the ReflectInsight viewer's perspective, is you want to use remote connections to connect to the router service and receive live login from that service. So from the ReflectInsight viewer, you'll go add a new connection. You'll give it the computer name. By default, it's going to try and connect to port 10.8.82. You can change that if you want. And you can add multiple remote connections. You're not limited by one. You can enable, disable connections as you like. If you shut down the viewer, the connections will be persisted to your next session. And really, not with remote connections, but with their ReflectInsight Router Service. It supports TCP IP and MSIQ out of the box, but really you can add your own custom protocols if need be. Now let's get to the demo and try remote logging with ReflectInsight. As you can see, I have the ReflectInsight live viewer up and running, and there's no information at this time, and I have no remote connections. So I'll come back to that in a bit. Now let's switch over to Visual Studio and do a quick demo. So I have a blank application here. App config is empty. And reflectinsight.config, this file here, we'll come back to that one. So what I want to first do is add ReflectInsight using NuGet. Install the latest. Okay, that's done. You can see we have reflectsoftware.insight as a reference. Now you might be asking yourself, when would you want to use the router service with ReflectInsight? Typically, you would use the remote logging feature to view live logging from an application running on another computer. For the sake of this demo, I'm going to connect to my local machine's router service to receive login data. Now this sample application is from GitHub repository and includes a number of samples for working with ReflectInsight. If you need to refer back to this demo, then this is the router service listener sample. Now let's add some code. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a using. So we're using reflectsoftware.insight. That's a pre-canned code up here. And add the main method. So just listening, I'm going to send over a bunch of messages until the Q key is pressed. Now for configuration, go to app config. I need to add in the ReflectInsight configuration. Now before I get too far ahead of myself, I need to configure the application to log to ReflectInsight Router Service. So what I'm doing now is I'm updating the app config to use a satellite configuration file. You can see that here. So I'm going to put all the ReflectInsight configuration inside this file. So that's all that we need to do for the app config. So now I'll go open up this file here. Come on. There we go. So here you have the ReflectInsight configuration. And the main parts to really focus on are, here's my router. I've named it my router TCP. I'm going to connect to my local host, so that's where I'm going to send the messages from my app to, and I'm going to send on this port 10.8.8.81. Now my listener groups, I have a few here. I have a binary file. I've turned that off for now. but I have a viewer. Now by default, ReflectInsight will always log to the viewer. So what I want to do is actually turn that off. So even if you don't put this in, it will always log to the viewer. So I have to explicitly turn this off. Now the other one I've added, and this is the one that will send to the router. I've added a router TCP. I've enabled it. I don't have a filter at this time. And here's the details for that router. So I'm going to send it to my router TCP. And here's all the configuration for that router up in here. So that's all the configuration I need to do for ReflectInsight. Again, I'm not going to send to the viewer. I've turned that off. And the only destination my application is going to log to is this router. Now if I come back to program.cf, I skipped over this earlier, but I'm going to use the default ReflectInsight log manager. And I'm just sending a few basic information types. Now I'll just go ahead and I'll build this. Put that over here. Bring up ReflectInsight. Now when you run this, you're going to expect no messages should go to ReflectInsight. So let's start this. Okay, I'm going to press any key. Okay, nothing's happening, and I have no messages going to the viewer. I'll leave my application running. Now I'm going to come to the viewer and I'm going to create a remote connection. So I'm going to call it localhost. It's going to be Callan PC. I'm going to leave the default port. I want to connect immediately. I'm going to say OK. You can notice it down there, it's trying to connect. Oh, wait, I made a mistake. I put these backwards. So, really, display name is Callan PC, and I'm going to connect to localhost. There we go. Now I'm connected. So now when I press the button, I'm going to see my logs coming through. So, this is my application sending log data to the router service. And now the viewer is picking up that data in real time from the router service. So I have a demo machine, but in reality you'd want to do this over your network to a QA machine, to a staging machine, production machine, what have you. You could connect to and pull all the information that way. Well, this brings us to the end of this demo. To recap, we covered installing ReflectInsight Router Service and its configuration. We added the router destination to our application, and we turned off the viewer destination. And finally, we connected to the router service from the ReflectInsight Live Viewer using a remote connection to view the logging information, live and in real time. For more information on ReflectInsight, please see our website. I also recommend you browse through the documentation, and if you get stuck, please contact us at support@reflectsoftware.com. I will be more than happy to assist you. Thank you and have a great day.